Welcome back to another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, Jack Greenstock, joined by a short panel this week, but amazing gentlemen as always. I want to pass it over first to Dr. MJ.
Hey, yeah, Dr. MJ Coco here from cocoforcannabis.com. We publish articles, tutorials, and guides on the science and practice of growing cannabis, and I am excited to talk about some plant training topics today.
Also looking forward to that as well. I wrote that in the show notes for the listeners out there. Make sure you're in the live chat if you are joining us on YouTube, and passing it over next to Spartan Grown. Welcome, Spartan.
Thanks, Jack. Happy to be here. Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word, or you could shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com. I am both an organic farmer and a synthetic farmer, so I can help with either.
Always a pleasure to have you on the panel with us. I think it's cool to have both perspectives and also the home grow versus commercial grow perspective, which our next panelist, Brandon Russ, has a little bit of a background in both of those as well. He's more on the commercial end of things these days. But welcome, Brandon. You're muted.
What's going on, everybody? I'm always happy to be here, interact with the rest of the panel members, answer questions from the chat. If you're not familiar with me, I'm Brandon Russ. You can find me on Instagram at russ.brandon. And you can find links to my farm, which is Black Label Organics, and my biofertilizer company, Bokashi Earthworks.
Thanks again for joining us, Brandon. I always appreciate your perspective. Next up, we have our resident IPM specialist, staff writer at Skunk Magazine, and recently or soon to be published as an IPM reference in a book coming out. I think it's by Saigo International, if I'm remembering correctly. But Matthew Gates, welcome.
Yeah, no, I am working with Saigo, but yeah, that's a different group. I'll have to talk about it sometime soon. Yeah, I'm Matthew Gates. I'm an IPM specialist, as you've heard, and if you're interested in some pest management information, you can find me in 3 main locations. You can find me on Instagram at SyncAngel. You can find me on Twitter at SyncAngel. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol. And yeah, if you have any questions about IPM, you can also find me on my Patreon, where we have a Discord server as well. And if you have any cool questions, put them in chat. And if you want all the comments to be visible, switch to live chat instead of talk.
I just got the notification on my phone, but I've got the YouTube up on my computer, so it's great to remind everybody to switch on over to that live chat so they can see all the interaction. So tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about plant training. This might seem like a little bit of a basic thing for some people, but there are a lot of advanced ways to go about doing it. I've seen everything from like mainlining to cannabis bonsais and a whole bunch of stuff in between. And I think it'd be cool if we just kind of go around the panel. Oops. I got some echo going on my end. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think it'd be nice to, I know we've done this in the Back to Basics episode and a few others in the past, but it's always cool to see where people are at now and if they've changed at all on their training methods. So first I'll pass it over to Dr. MJ, and maybe you could give us a rundown of how you like to train your plant.
Hey, yeah, I was just getting distracted by things, but I can definitely give you a rundown on how I like to train my plants. I almost always run mainlines or manifolds, so I run plants off of a single node, usually the 3rd node. I'll grow it out to be about 6 nodes tall and then chop the plant in half, clean up the lower growth, leave the leaves, and then grow the whole plant out of that one node, either topping it twice more or topping it only once more, to create 8 mains off the bottom. And it's an interesting training technique. It really spreads the plant out. I don't generally start with more than 8 mains. So for a while there, after I get the 8, the side branches get trimmed off. But you still end up with, triple or quadruple that number of tops, because you do eventually get sort of side branches that grow up to the canopy as well. I find it to be a really good way to sort of spread apical dominance, to prevent sort of the one single cola from getting too big or too tall. And to produce, to really fill in the canopy with an even sort of canopy. There are other ways to do that, but I certainly have gotten used to running mainlines and manifolds. And I do that with autos and with photos.
Really good stuff. I think that is a great way to go about doing things, and I think a lot of the people on Cocoa for Cannabis have had success emulating similar training I was on your Instagram right now. I was thinking about doing some screen sharing because you've got a few really good shots of the main line and how it. I think for these types of episodes, it's actually good to give the people something to look at as a reference point, because when we describe something with our words, sometimes it doesn't always line up with what someone might imagine.
Yeah, so I actually have articles on this if you want to
perfect.
do a share, a screen share.
Yeah. Let's,
with those
send that in the Zoom
images
chat.
that would be helpful, and really try to take growers through it. It's funny. A lot of new growers get sort of concerned about those style of training techniques, but running a mainline is like the most formulaic thing. I can tell you what to do every day, and it's very simple, and you're probably not going to screw it up too much. LST, which seems to be what everybody tries to do at first as sort of an intro training technique, I think is much more of an art and requires sort of, a lot more catering to the specifics of the situation. So yeah, my thought with new growers always is just to encourage them to do these kinds of training techniques if their plants are growing well. That there's no sort of bar that they need to pass before they can top a plant or before they can even do a mainline. I think it's perfectly fine to do it on your first grow if the plant's growing well.
I definitely agree. A lot of people that I have seen with their first grows in the last 5 or so years on Instagram that are documented have done mainlining and either followed the Cocoa for Cannabis guide, or I know Grow Weed Easy is another one that pops up on the, they have pretty good SEO. So if people Google like how to train a plant, oftentimes their articles will come up. I think that these are a little bit better detailed at Dr. MJ's site, where you can see like he has each node labeled for you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So he's talking about this is about the size of the plant. He'll grow, and then he's going to top it back to this number 3 node and start his main line from there. And you can see an example of what it ends up looking like. So thank you so much, Doc, for sharing with us some of your tips and tricks there. I want to pass it over next to Spartan Grown.
Yeah, for me, so I'll use a lot of different techniques depending on the situation, but the main goal for me is I have 4 plants that I am putting in a 4x4 space. So that means each plant has to completely fill, to my satisfaction, a 2x2 square space. So that's my general plan and training goal. So I can achieve that by topping. I can achieve that traditional topping. I can achieve that by GML topping, which so a GML topping, I don't know if it's even a topping. You don't take the apical meristem at all. You just take the leaves around it. And it works just like a top as far as it. Well, it doesn't work just like a top because you still have the apical meristem, but you instead of having 2 shoots, it just slows down that branch. So it will by removing those fan leaves, I'll call them fan leaves, up towards the top of the apical meristem. It could be this small, but by removing those fan leaves, you're removing some of the. Let me see. It wouldn't be cytokinins; it'd be the other one.
Auxins.
Auxins. So you'd be removing some of the auxins. So it's just redistributing them. And so by the time it rebuilds up auxins, the other branches that are lower than it will tend to catch up. So if you could just keep going in there, removing top leaves of the uppermost plants or the uppermost branches, that'll get you there too. But sometimes I'll do a regular hard topping so that I can get the 2 shoots because I want to multiply my tops, my colas. So it's all depending on exactly what I do a lot of low stress training with those plant yo-yos, which I have right up here. So I can show people what I'm talking about. So it's on tension. So I can take like this and hook this to the edge of the pot and hook this to whatever branch I want. And then I can set it to whatever length I want and put whatever tension I want to bring a branch exactly where I want it and hold it there. So that's another one. So it's all really, for me, it all depends on the situation, the way the plant's growing, and how bad I need it to be different. Worst case scenario, I'll just fucking go in there and super crop. It's not like it's terrible to super crop. It is in flower, I think, in late flower. But as long as you're within the first 2 weeks of flower, I'll still super crop. If I have something that's growing so vigorous and I can't slow it down, I'll go ahead and super crop it and just bend it over.
I think that's respectable. I've super cropped a little bit later into flower, sometimes with good result and sometimes with lackluster result. The lackluster being you super crop it, and instead of popping back up over the next few days, it literally just flopped there and like hung out sideways. But in that scenario, it actually worked just fine because like the light distribution across like the bud, it filled in just fine. It just
Yeah.
never got back up even with the rest of the canopy. And I
Yeah,
think that
if you
was
super
like,
crop it too hard, I call that a failed super crop. If I super crop it too hard, it'll never get back to the tops. It stays below the upper canopy, and that's how I know I went too hard and I did a bad job of super cropping. And I do that still to this day. It's you got to have a light touch on some cultivars. One other tip I want to mention that you don't hear a lot, and I'm not I'm trying to think if I saw this in a scientific paper or not. It's just something I do. I don't know if there's science backed up to it or not. But every time I do a transplant, I top. So because in my opinion, whatever happens in the roots happens in the shoots. So if I top the shoots, I'm also encouraging those roots to spread out right after a transplant, which is exactly what I want. Because they'll branch just like the plant branches above it.
it's interesting because I've heard people on both sides of the spectrum with that one, where some people are like, oh, it's stressful to transplant, so you want to minimize stress, so don't do any training like a week before or a week after, just like let it be. But then there's people like yourself who are like, I'm going to top it the same fucking day I transplant it, because when those roots down low are branching out into that larger pot, the top, if you top it then, can also branch out and kind of,
That isn't from
really
agriculture though. That mindset is from the cannabis field, and it's the only place I've ever heard it. You'll routinely see, if you work at a greenhouse or something, you'll routinely see people on transplants actually rough the roots up on purpose to get them unroot bound.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you often score roots that are root bound to
there
generate
you
more lateral root growth after transplant.
Yeah, so
that's usually
more
though,
of a cannabis mindset.
If you've let the plant go a little too long. I don't think there's a big issue with doing a transplant and a topping pretty close together, but I do try to spread it out a little bit, not do it on the same day.
I'm in veg. It also, they can be stressed as they want in veg.
I disagree totally. I have to make sure my veg is super, super on point. I have a specific goal in mind in veg, which is the front load calcium, front load nitrogen. That way I can back off the calcium during transition to push potassium. And the reason I do that is because calcium is a cation that's antagonistic to magnesium and potassium. So if it is really high during veg, it's going to beef out super strong, but you want that lower when you're transitioning, because too high of the calcium will make it so you don't get enough of the potassium, even if you're adding adequate amounts. I take specific care in veg to make sure that they're really, really healthy and that they're like meeting a target level for tissue before the flip. Because when I do that, I know that like I'll have like super high nitrogen reserves, and then I'll feed no nitrogen through the whole cycle, but I'll be able to get all the way to the 9-week cycle with green plants and then just see the senescence at the end.
I follow what you're doing there with nitrogen, Brandon. I'm not so sure you can front load calcium in the same way. I mean, I understand the idea behind it in terms of the antagonistic relationship with magnesium in particular.
You can. What you do is you get the percentage of calcium up in the tissue. So what I'll do
is it's just not mobile. So it's not going to be able to feed new growth. It will be there in the old tissue, but it's just not going to be able to, like, nitrogen can be relocated.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not mobile, but that's why you want to sufficiently fill all parts of that plant, because what we'll see in sap is that you'll see low calcium at the tops of the plants if it's low at the bottoms, right? And because it can't pull from the lowers, you'll just start to see a deficiency. So what I'm talking about is in veg, getting that percentage in the tissue up above 5% total leaf mass. So, hey guys, get out here. That way, when I go into the transition, I'm not adding. I don't have to add.
This is an interview from a menagerie, man. It's hysterical.
Yeah, sorry. I have a new puppy, and my 7-year-old dog is not a fan.
Not a fan of the puppy.
No.
And then you got Lucky in the background squawking. It's quite the menagerie. That's a good term there, Doc.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do want to lower it, but keep it sufficient. And then what you're doing is you're pushing the potassium.
But Brandon, to push back to
I've thought a lot about calcium issues because we face a lot of them growing in cocoa. So there's been no way that we can sort of avoid continually feeding calcium throughout the flowering cycle for that reason. You can't, well, at least in my experience, we're not able to sort of front load that and then taper off in any way.
It works really, really well for the type of cultivation that I'm doing. But again, sorry, hold on, give me a second, guys.
It's all good. When you get back, we'll talk to you a little bit about training. Noah the Grower has joined us a little bit earlier than expected, so we're going to have him join here in just a moment. Matthew Gates, our resident IPM specialist. I'm curious if you, when you grow cannabis or other plants, if you have any preferred type of training mechanisms. Do you like trellising or any sort of physical supports or things like that?
I like that guy that's able to turn a tree into a chair. You ever see that picture?
I've seen a few people do something like that, but I'm blanking on the one that you're referring to, maybe.
Yeah, I'm being very vague. No, that was a joke answer. I do like the mainlining process a lot more personally, but to be honest, sometimes I let that go a little bit longer and I just top a little bit later. I don't grow Christmas trees, that sort of a thing, but I'm also kind of inconsistent, to be honest. I don't have a real favorite. I would say if I did have one, it'd be the mainlining though.
It is really satisfying. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to derail the conversation. Some people were asking for they're asking what people are doing for their IPM, and I suppose that keeping because this is always a debate in cannabis, right? And we've extensively discussed what our opinions are about how many leaves you take off with deleafing and that sort of a thing. But coverage is a big part of IPM with regards to chemical and even biocontrol applications. So sometimes if you have a high plant load, it can be worth it, or even sometimes not worth it, depending on how bushy those plants get, to sort of keep them from kind of hitting each other. And with a hot latent viroid being what it is, so nefarious and kind of pernicious and invisible, I know some people who are trying to use things like that as your management of the actual total foliage and how extensive it is as a way to prevent easy transfer of that pathogen. And possibly this could be helpful for other pathogens too.
It just seems so inefficient to me to leave any space really at all in between plants. I mean, to set up your grow in such a way that the plants really cannot touch each other, in an indoor grow, you're just gonna be wasting a ton of light.
I actually 100% agree with you.
I do too.
So I understand it from that, but it's just an important thing that people have to sort of think about. Yeah.
Personally, I think also because of the way that people move throughout the foliage, that I wouldn't expect that to have a ton of utility.
So I want to give Noah the Grower a chance to jump in. He's got his hand up and he just got here. So Noah, do you want to give yourself an introduction and maybe jump in?
Yeah, definitely. I'm Noah the Grower with 2 E's from Instagram. You can find me there. And we're just kind of listening to what you guys have been saying the last couple of minutes. I have a quick question. If you think that you could, for Matthew, if you think that you could be in a situation where maybe you might be more prone to some type of a pest or more prone to some type of a powdery mildew or mold, do you think that maybe defoliating from the bottom up, just is kind of as a preventive, is kind of maybe a way that you could just less surface matter, that's kind of how I feel, but I'm just kind of curious what you think about that.
No, that's a really astute point. I feel like that's really useful in a lot of cases, because simply there's 2 main ways, and I think it's very uncontroversial. The first part is
the actual pest.
Yeah, well, there's that. If you already have the problem, just simply culling them that way, especially if you're in veg, and you're just going to regrow that growth, that can sometimes be cost effective. But the other way is just that simply by not having as much, I guess you could say, like you say, the coverage of the leaves can be cryptic and camouflaging the pest itself, so it can be harder to like scout more effectively. Certainly, this is true for other crops as well. So I think that's totally valid to a certain extent.
I didn't even think of the fact that it would be easier to scout because you wouldn't have as. That's a great point. I didn't even think about that. I was just saying that less surface matter for pests and pathogens to be on, but the scouting, that's an interesting take.
There's another issue there, which is leaves that aren't receiving any light are still going to transpire and contribute relative humidity, and that can be an issue for things like powdery mildew. So if you're facing a high humidity situation or a low airflow situation, what we call lollipopping, sort of trimming up the skirts, can certainly help manage that situation.
I just want to throw out a number on that because there's a group here in San Diego, I think it might have been Outco, who, not that they're perfect, I think that Matthew has some not so great history with them, but they did a study where they looked at the transpiration of the leaves at a certain ppfd level and like whether they're photosynthesizing or just transpiring and like which levels were optimal.
That was on Kiss Organics podcast, wasn't it?
Yeah, so they talked about 200 ppfd or below. The plant is not going to photosynthesize at all. It's just going to be dumping off basically water or moisture into the environment. So if you are having PM or too high of RH, then lollipopping anything that's not getting above 200 ppfd of light is going to be beneficial to help regulate the environment, increase airflow.
200 seems pretty high to me.
They did a actual study, Justice. I can't think of her first name.
Allison Justice.
Allison Justice. Yep, you can find it.
I'm going to look into that. I would have thought it was closer to like 100 ppfd, but yeah, that's exactly the point that I'm making. If you don't have light, the leaves are still going to be dumping that moisture into the air.
No, I think that's a really excellent point. And I definitely encourage people to look at that research. And I think that's part of like considering like the holistic system of the plant, right? Because like that's just the physics of the biology of that plant. And I think that's easy to sort of not consider because it's sort of invisible, especially for people who are just starting to grow. I wanted to say that what Noah said just before was the second point that I was going to make, which is that not only do you like make it easier for you to scout and there's less tissue for the pest to like, well, if it's like an arthropod, like an insect or a mite to interact with, but also you have, like you say, just less total stuff for it to mess with. And that can be crucial and helpful just by itself. You just have like the sort of unnecessary or minimal damage potential. And then of course you have the coverage for your biocontrols and your spray applications and things like this.
Yeah, less to scout, so it's quicker to scout and it's easier to scout because there's not if you have leaves on top of leaves on top of leaves and you're rustling through there, you're going to see like 70 or 80% of the leaves. You're not going to see 100%. But if you thin it out enough that you can actually go through and properly crop scout, you'll find something a lot sooner. Brandon has his hand up, and I think he's been patiently waiting. I don't know if you have a point that you wanted to slip in there, Brandon, but go ahead.
So plant training, there's so many, like Matt was saying, there's a lot of holistic things that go along with it, right? The physical removal of pests, also the humidity aspect, but there's something that we didn't touch on, which is oftentimes overlooked. Okay, so there are certain nutrients that are mobile and that will get pulled from the lowers to sufficiently feed the tops of the plant. Now, if you are deficient, let's say you were doing like something was good, like everything was good, your soil was really healthy, yada, yada, yada. But for some reason, you're not getting adequate amount of maybe some of your like photosynthetic chemicals, right? Like iron, and let's say manganese and magnesium, those ones, right? Yeah. So Yeah, nitrogen. Okay, so what ends up happening is you remove these leaves that could potentially be a source of nutrition for the promotion of the tops of the plants, that if you remove those, you're not going to get that. So if you're deficient in if you're deficient in nutrition, when you do that, well, those things are pulling, you could actually further stress the plant because they're not able to translocate what they need.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. And that's why I don't cut off the leaves unless there's a reason to do it. Those lower leaves are essentially, like you're saying, a bank that the plant can draw from if it needs to later on.
Do you think there's anything to letting the plant decide? Like Spartan Grown a while ago said something that stuck, like imprinted, burned in my mind. He said, if I see a leaf that's over 50% fucked up or like damaged or just not looking healthy, and like, let's say like, sometimes the tips of the leaf start to get crispy or whatever it is, there might be a spot on it. Like if greater than half that leaf, it might even just start shriveling up because it's not getting enough light or it's not in a good spot in the room. Like sometimes my plants will just tell me like, I don't want this leaf. Like this leaf looks like shit.
I don't think that's the message the plant is sending. I think the message the plant is sending in that situation is, I'm going to start pulling nutrients out of this leaf. And that's why you see it getting deficient. And that's why you see the tip burn out.
And it's also
if you cut it off, you're just cutting off that source of nutrition that the plant was just tapping. So I would let that plant
it'll
die
abscess
and
when
fall off.
Are you saying this because it'll abscess when it's finished? Is that what your point is?
Did you say oh yeah.
My point?
Or just so that I'm clear on the when
the plant starts drawing nutrients out of the leaf, when it starts to treat that leaf as a source of nutrients, then you will notice the leaf become problematic looking. But that's really an indication that the plant is treating it as a sink, as a source. And I would let it continue to treat it as a source until it senesces.
Exactly. I guess that's my point. Until it abscesses and not cut it beforehand is your point. Yeah.
But also you have to remember that if that is occurring, you're well beyond a point where like it's like, oh shit, like that has to be fixed immediately. Like you need to be able to give that plant what it needs.
It could be a multitude of things.
It somewhat depends on the media and the method of fertilization and all of that, whether this is an emergency or not. But yeah, I agree.
And
you
all
should also
the time
evaluate what's causing the
frame
issue
as well.
I was gonna say, Brandon, the time frame, what you just hit on, that's really important for me because I've seen a perfectly healthy leaf go from like bright green and like Kelly, just like lush, to the next day it was completely dead and gone, where some take a week to start showing a little bit of yellow on the tip and it slowly creeps into the middle of the leaf, where there's like different mechanisms that the plant is going through. Like I tried the Jeff Lowenfels method of not removing any leaves off the plant ever, and the plant eventually, I just had too many plants in the space, it started picking leaves. Like overnight I'd go in there in the morning before lights off, I'd look at where the plant was, I'd go in there right as the light came on, and in that one dark period there'd be like maybe 10 to 15 leaves that would have gone from perfectly healthy to completely dead and gone over just one dark cycle.
And you know what's really interesting is because I'm able to reference off of data that I collect continuously, you will not see a deficiency in cannabis until it's reached probably around 50%. Okay. That being said, if you can't visually see a symptom, which is also hard because different varieties of cannabis, different cultivars will express deficiency symptoms differently. And I'll give you an example. Boron, when it's really high, you'll have burned edges on the leaf tips, right? All around all on the serrations.
Yep.
Okay. Some varieties don't do that. And what they'll do is it'll actually look like purple, like it's an anthocyanin type of function, and it's not. It's copper. It's just that the plant responds differently. So being able to look at something visually, if you're trying to do a visual diagnosis, you're already probably 50% deficit of what that plant needs, right? That's why when I'm able to do looking at tissue and sap is I can look at what the plant is pulling from the mobile nutrients, the things that are mobile, and we'll be able to see if the things in the older tissue have less than the stuff in the new tissue, right? If everything's adequate and it's sufficient and they match up and they line up, we know that there's adequate amount of whatever nutrient that may be that the plant requires. Now, sometimes what you'll see is a perfectly healthy plant, but you'll see that things like phosphorus is lower and being pulled from the lowers to fulfill the tops. When you see something like that in sap, you know that you need to add phosphorus for this specific variety, but you're able to catch these things before they become a deficiency, right? So you're always, I'm always able to look at how things are moving around and then give them what is preemptively what they're going to need.
I think it's a interesting thing that you're tapping into, because I've had grows where the plant stayed green and healthy looking the entire time, and then the very next grow had the plant stay green and healthy looking the entire time, and I did mostly the same, but a little bit of improvement was made, and nothing that I could see visually. Like, there was no deficiencies on run 1, we'll call it, but run 2 yielded way more healthier plants, better looking bud at the finish line. So there's sometimes things where, like, as growers, we might think, oh, it was healthy start to finish, like I did everything perfect. But if we're not doing the soil testing, if we're not doing the sap testing and tissue testing, we might not know the full potential of what's even possible, or how much healthier it could be. It might look healthy, but like, what's the healthiest possible?
And the other side of what he's talking
sort of
about there, what Brandon's talking about, is that by the time you see visual signs of damage, you're usually way too far. You've been doing damage to the plant for a while. That's true with most of these issues with nutrient deficiencies or other things like light damage, for example. By the time you start to see it, it's like way past that point where you should have been.
Because you can't like go back in time, and you're only going to have the plant for so long. You kind of need those nutrients.
Right, but I always hear a lot of growers talk about, well, I'm just going to keep pushing until I see it react or see it respond negatively. And, whether that's feeding more nutrients or less nutrients or more light or whatever it is, my response is always, by the time you see the problems have already been going on for quite a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that a lot of these sort of nutritional symptoms are like a color change in the leaf or the stem or something like this, which I'm curious about, and I'd like to hear more about, because I have a hard time understanding how the phenology of those nutrient deficiencies could be so radically different. But like purple stem versus purple stem. But I was curious, or I guess the point I want to say is that the abiotic factors for like certain problems might not be nutrition, and they can look almost exactly the same. It could be a pathogen, it could be biotic,
or too
so
cold.
Things can happen, and so it's important to consider as much context as possible. But as an IPM specialist, sometimes because I work with a lot more, I would say that like I have a biology bias, and I have to sometimes train myself to look at potential abiotic factors too, like the ones that MG Coco mentioned or the ones that Brandon mentioned.
We had a question from the chat. Sour Diesel Tangy asked, well, if I'm using supposedly high quality hydroponic nutrients, shouldn't all of the nutrients be available in the case of, like we were talking about earlier, like certain stuff's not able to translocate in the plant? So mobile nutrients versus immobile nutrients. They're saying if they supply the plant with nutrients every single time, shouldn't there be basically like the immobile nutrients at the top and at the bottom as well?
So I have a really good analogy for understanding how this works. If you have a plant, right, you have to think of it being fulfilled nutrient wise from the bottom up. Okay. Now things that are not mobile are going to fill up and then they're going to stop. Okay. So like calcium, you have to fill out all of the calcium through all the bottoms, all the way up to the top. So you have to have a sufficient amount of calcium to meet that plant's requirement. And it's the same with the other nutrients. Now, the other nutrients will translocate and they'll go right directly to top, things like nitrogen, things like potassium, magnesium. Those are things that are going to be able to translocate very easily. But again, it's all about the plant is going to try to fulfill all of its lowers and then move everything up.
Right, but like why? That doesn't answer anything about what I was asking, which is why the discrepancy between the two, and how do we know?
Maybe I missed the question. What was the question
Yeah,
again?
the question was like, so like the purple stem thing that you mentioned, for example.
Oh, that's a cation imbalance. So a lot of people will say it's genetic, but if anybody who has a variety that they don't think can be green and it's genetic, it's in my experience, I have not yet found a variety that I could manage and make green and not have purple stems. And like my death breath is one of those that it will be really, really purple, but it's because it has that particular variety. It has to maintain a certain balance of potassium over magnesium, or it'll just turn. I mean, it'll turn overnight if that role is changed and magnesium goes over potassium. So what I see consistently across tons of varieties that we're running and pheno hunting over and over again, whether it's landrace stuff, whether it's old school stuff, new school stuff, it's that cation balance between calcium, magnesium, and potassium that is affecting the color of the stem. And then also cold, right? So cold can do that, but if those things are in balance and you have a healthy nutrition, you're going to be more resistant to that change.
I want to say two reasons cold is actually going to impact it is cold is known to bring out anthocyanin production across a number of plants, cannabis and otherwise. It's a cold response. It can be shocked into turning more purple if it has the capacity to do that within its DNA. It's one of the responses. Another thing is, like, I work with a lot of newer growers that either are growing for their first time or switched from HPS or CMH over to LED. And they're noticing that their plants are really turning yellow oftentimes. And I'm one of those people that, like Matthew was talking about, like maybe he views it first from a biological perspective. Oftentimes for me, I look at it as like, well, they are growing from seed. There might not be like a pest issue. Like they're a new grower. It's likely their environment's not dialed in. So I ask them, what's your temperature? And they're usually like,
you have to increase your 5 photosynthetic nutrients under LED.
But so, Santos, that's interesting. If that's the case, then I think that would imply that. So, like the purpling is like an anthocyanin production, right? It's not just like a trick of the light by not having those nutrients in the tissues.
There's a few stress response, I think.
It can be. So it's like it can be genetic. It can be 100% genetic. Like you could have a healthy plant turn 100% purple without, and we could maybe make the argument that there's never a no stress grow, but you have plants that turn consistently purple at 85 degrees or 65 degrees. So I don't think it's like a temperature or like you're tricking it to turn purple. Like there's some things that are actually genetically going to go purple.
You know, what's really weird though is because I've grown Gorilla Glue for a really long time. And when I switched to LED and I grew Gorilla Glue, it would purple. And that was something that I'd never seen. And so to me, it was like, you know, and it's not all, and what I'm seeing too is,
are you talking about the buds, Brandon? Or are you talking about
I'm talking about the buds right now, but also I see more purpling in the stems because of the needed increase in the photosynthetic nutrients. Because look, okay, so I'm running those Photon Tech lights, right? And I have those things set at 27%, which is super low. And I'm still having to increase things like magnesium, things like iron, manganese, and sulfur and nitrogen. I have to increase all of those under these lights because they're a lot closer. And I usually run my LED lights really, really high, because if I let them go lower, I start running into problems with those photosynthetic nutrients where like I can't adequately get enough of them to meet that high PPFD.
It's like using a shade cloth or a diffuse greenhouse cover, where like when you have the glass greenhouse and it gets super intense, the plants aren't going to be as happy. But when you diffuse it and you get a more even PPFD across that canopy when they're higher up, your plants just tend to be a lot happier. And
yeah, we're dealing with Liebig's law here. So Brandon must be running into some other minimum that is preventing the photosynthesis at that levels of PPFD, because it wouldn't be carbon dioxide at that level. So yeah,
would guess,
it would be some sort of nutrient that the plant isn't getting an adequate dose of.
Yeah,
not in Brandon's case, but in a lot of cases, it's been cold for me. Like if I have growers, literally, they'll be like, it's 71 degrees in their room, or 73 or 72. If I have them push it up to 78 to 82, almost 100% of the time, their plants will go from yellow as fuck to green and healthy, lush, growing, amazing. Like they're like, oh my God, LED is the best.
Especially in LED. Yep, that's one of the things too. I have to run everything hotter and more humid in LED to get the right like photosynthetic capacities. And here's the thing, like I'll do Epsom salt Foliar because that's the main thing that I see is magnesium, but I don't want to push magnesium too high in my soil because it's an antagonistic cation that interacts with calcium and potassium. So I would opt to do a Foliar to make up those deficiencies. But also, I haven't tested the soil yet for the box, and I'll have that later. So I'll be able to do a top dress, fulfill any deficiencies that may be there based off of the data. And then again, the box, pruning and everything, getting everything all squared away so everything is level and all that's really, really important because I have so many plants close together and I'm doing things a little bit differently,
You should check out
Brandon. You mentioned the 5 photosynthetic nutrients, and chat's kind of chirping off on that. Is that NPK, CM?
No,
I was going to ask.
No. Your foot. Okay. Okay. So it's going to be sulfur, nitrogen, magnesium, iron, and molybdenum.
I didn't count. Is that 5?
He did. He counted on his hand.
Okay, so at the chlorophyll molecule, the base of that is magnesium. So anything involved in the production of chlorophyll, those are the 5 chemicals that are involved.
I want to give Noah the Grower a chance to jump in. We were talking about plant training for a bit there. We're getting into a bit of the chemistry and things like that and botany side of it, but I would love to hear Noah the Grower about some of your training techniques and things that you like to implement in your early stages of the veg and all the way up through flower. What do you like to do with your training?
I do a lot of obviously topping. I top once, and then I like to just kind of like, I've heard different people call it, I guess, super cropping, but I just whatever branch is like sticking up the highest, I'll just pinch it till I kind of feel it pop. And I've broken some, obviously, and but I've gotten really good at it, kind of just knowing where to do it and making that knuckle there, and then just that'll make all my once the tops come out from that one top, that'll make all the tops kind of catch up, and then I will lollipop trim the skirts up just so I have airflow underneath it, and then I can I've usually use a net, but I've done it before. Like when I was in my closet, I didn't have a net, and I've done it in tent before, so. There's different techniques, but I always do the one topping, usually like right around the plants, like 6 to 8 inches, after the clone, and then I like to just kind of pinch that top one, whatever's highest, and then as it goes along, I'll do that to just kind of maintain it, keep it, bush it out, you know what I'm saying? And then sometimes I'll even like pinch one and then kind of bend it a little bit, You just experiment as you go, and when you have a few plants, you can try different techniques and find something that works for you. Whatever makes you comfortable in your plant training. So,
I'm showing off some of Noah's plant training in the earlier stages. Going into flower, you could see he does like you said, the one topping, and then he does a fair amount of bending underneath the trellis net. You can see it fills out pretty good here, and then I'm going to just scroll up through his feed, and you can see some of the beautiful buds. And here's a it'll kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. Oh, it's not wanting to load. So here we go. Cheers, Noah. Definitely looking like you're doing great stuff over there, and the training's definitely working. The buds are looking beautiful as well, so always happy to have you. I know you showed up a little bit late, but we're always thankful when you get to join the panel, and I love scrolling through your feed. showing out the buds.
Ooh-wee.
Look at this Pepsi can here next to that bud. And then you got Noah showing off some of the hard work, looking beautiful, big, juicy nugs from those HPs.
You're making me blush. Everyone here is an absolute ninja, and it's a pleasure to be here with all you guys. A lot of the stuff that's really popped off my room was just a few techniques that I learned from Spartan and Brandon and everyone here. So I'm very, very lucky to be a part of this group, and I love being here every week. So
that Bio 365 soil is working out for you so far. I'm loving how
I love it.
Green and healthy and lush these plants are looking. It seems like it's definitely working out. I'm curious to see the final results with it, because your other recipe, which I imagine is what you grew this with, seems to be working pretty damn well. So it's got to be tough
I was just going to ask him about
change
that
it up.
soil. I saw that and I was thinking about it.
Yeah, I love it. So actually, Full Duplex, I seen it on his page, and then I was talking to him about getting hooked up with it. The rep reached out, hooked me up with some, and I have some that are in Bio Flower right now, Bio 365 Flower. I have some that are in Bio All, and I'm really loving it. It's something like I one of them I put in, and I thought, well, it's starting to turn a little bit yellow, and I gave it just a little teeny bit of what I normally give my plants. And I could tell it kind of burned a little bit. So it's definitely some fine tuning, but everything is super, super green. It is definitely legit. And
so there's like a veg mix that then you transplant into a flower mix.
And I'm just trying to get through one run of flower, but I'm just going to order a whole pallet of it, because I mean, it is definitely legit soil, and I am totally in love with it.
What size bags are those? Are they like a 2 cubic foot bag, or is it?
2 cubic feet. And that one right there, that Bio Flower, that's got a lot of nutrients in it, and it's really nutrient dense, and I think it's a little more expensive, but I think the Bio All, man, the Bio All is just, for the price and everything, it is absolutely
Miss Chronic
good.
Seeds is on her way over here with Rab right now.
But
Small world.
So the Bio All is the one that's like you can just use it all the time.
It's great. So I just put. I haven't had the balls yet to take it from straight, because I use an aero cloner right now, and I haven't put it straight from the aero cloner into that, but I put the aero cloner into a Dixie cup, which is what I've always done, and I just put a little bit of the Fox Farm Ocean Forest that I have, but then I transplant it directly into twos in the Bio All, and they're just absolutely luscious. And I will say something. I have been really paying more close attention than I have in a long time, because I'm just really trying to get it dialed in with this new soil. And I decided to trim up some of the bottom skirts just so I'd have less areas for stuff, because we're getting ready to, get into hotter temperatures around here. And I noticed that it did kind of stunt the growth a little bit. I noticed it when I took off the bottom leaf. So I'm thinking this next time I'm going to take a run where I'm just going to let it go. So I'm really trying to just kind of step out of the box, you know what I mean? Because where I was at, I'm pretty confident in what I can do, and I just want to learn new things. And one of the next things I want to learn is I want to get into cocoa. I've never really done straight cocoa, and I'm sure I'll be over at Dr. MJ Coco's page. He knows way more about that than me, so I'm just trying to learn every single facet of this that I can.
That's one thing that I really wanted to. I brought it up in chat, but I wasn't able to bring it up, with everybody here in the panel. But that's the one thing with the leaf stripping, where I'm, different if I'm at home or at work. Like if I'm doing an organic setting or a synthetic setting, because in a synthetic setting, I can replace those nutrients the next day.
But you can do that in organics too.
And I can, but not as easily.
You can just as easily. Check it out. So one of the things that we're doing
and why would you be against taking leaves off if you can just fucking replace those minerals?
Well, I'm not talking about me, I'm saying in general. So what we are started to do, right, is we started loading up our beds with a lot more plants. Basically, we do the same thing. We top when they're really, really young, because at scale, dude, you can't go through when plants are big.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It just takes too much time, right?
Yeah.
So you do them when they're little, you let them grow out, you do your little, pruning before you transplant at the bottom. So when they go in the beds, they're good, right?
Right.
So what we're seeing is that if we hit these things with a micronutrient, and kind of just like with a low NPK as well, I can do most of these with water soluble mineral sulfates, iron sulfate, gypsum, things like that, right? These are all water soluble.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing is that when we apply these right after we do our bottom pruning, and we're kind of going through and like pruning everything out for airflow and stuff, dude, we'll hit them with that solution. And
Just as a root drench you're talking?
Yeah, as a root drench. So we'll hit them with this, micronutrient light macronutrient solution to really just help them like with that stress factor. And it really, so they're not affected, because usually we're not having any issues, but when we're testing something, it's a snapshot in time, right? It doesn't mean that is that every single moment of the day. So I have to preemptively think of what this plant is going to need based off of it, but it's not always going to be 100%, so we do something like that. We know, like, if we're waiting on a test result back, but it's time to do a strip or a prune, we're going to go ahead and do that anyway, and then when we get back our test results, I'll look at it and say, well, I added this, this, and this. This is what was happening. Okay, this is, I can either subtract or add.
Right. You could even do that foliarly and get it to the plant faster that way with some of that.
Yeah, that's another thing too. And one of the things in organics, if you do a fulvic, so we're talking like a lot of fulvic acid, maybe like 200 grams for a gallon of water. And then you put in your micronutrient sulfates, things like iron sulfate, copper sulfate, potassium sulfate, all those things are, and it's crazy because they're all rocks, man. These things come in like cardboard packaging type stuff or whatever, what I'm talking about, the
recyclable material.
Yeah, and it's like, it looks like gravel. If you didn't know it was plant nutrients, you would just think it was like gravel for your driveway.
Yeah, like gypsum comes.
Yeah, dude. So you can add these into this fulvic mix and then use like an ounce for like 50 gallons as a foiler.
Damn.
Isn't gypsum one of the components that they use in drywall? Like, can't it?
And
be used
cement,
as gardening,
yeah.
gardening gypsum, and then there's
two
building.
different. There's two different like grades. You got the gypsum in your walls and the gypsums we grow with, and typically the stuff we grow with is technically usually a little cleaner as far as heavy metals and stuff like that go. But you should look for those reports or get them tested yourself.
There's a gypsum mine here in Oklahoma. It's where we source all of our gypsum, and it's very, very clean gypsum. It's one of the best that I've ever seen. There's
All the soil stuff is like cocaine powder, man. That shit's so white. The diamond grade or whatever, it comes out and it's like, holy shit, this stuff is super water soluble. Like, you put it in there and it disappears.
It's from the mine out here in Oklahoma.
That's a definitely good grade. I haven't worked with a lot of gypsum, but even like regular garden gypsum compared to that, in my opinion, is like much, much lower quality.
Oh yeah. So if you go get something like just gypsum, maybe at like a garden store somewhere, you're probably gonna get these like pelletized. It makes me nervous looking at it, because I'm just sitting there going, man, there's heavy metals in this. I know it. I'm just looking at it. I'm like, you can smell heavy metals, man. If you know what you're looking at, like,
you just pay $5 for 40 pounds,
right? And then you get the stuff that's mined out here, and it's like this super fine water soluble. Like, it's really cool about the gypsum, right? I mean, you need a lot of it for the solubility of the calcium, but it'll float in solution and it'll stay that way in the soil. So every time you water, it's still there and it'll fall into solution. So that's one of the really, really good benefits of gypsum, man. I use it. It's one of my main nutrients, because one of the things that people, I think, don't understand is that calcium is actually your number one nutrient for cannabis. It's the ppms are always going to be above nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and anything else.
Well, you can smell those heavy metals, but you can taste them too.
Oh yeah.
Only if
hopefully
you're
we're not tasting the gypsum, but I am with you there. Like, I don't know if aluminum is considered a heavy metal, but whenever I think of like the metal smell, I think of like a baseball bat smell. That, like, I've got one right here, but it's got a very distinct smell. And even like if you licked a baseball bat, which I mean, who knows why you would? You can actually fucking taste it. So it is interesting that you can smell
It
the
sounds like
presence of some
something
of
you've
them.
done, Jack.
You know what?
I mean,
It sounds like
we've
dumb.
all played
You're-
baseball and we've all been kids. So
They people would like kiss the bat for good luck and stupid shit. So I don't
That
know.
is awesome.
Yes, indeed. Wait, are you trying to say it's not good luck?
no,
No.
it's good luck.
You gotta believe. You gotta believe.
That's where the magic is.
This is what I come here for, guys. Dr. MJ digging it, Jack. That was hilarious. That was awesome.
Dude, it's like if you build it, they will come. The whole Field of Dreams. That
Dude,
totally
it's
applies
true.
to cannabis. Like,
It's totally true. I was actually just saying this the other day. I was like, I wasn't saying it to anybody. I was just by myself going, if I build it, they will come. And I'm just like yelling this shit in my greenhouses. I swear, dude.
Okay.
I get
Manifesting.
high. I get high, dude, like before I work and like
You better be careful, Brandon. Practice
Celebrate life, Brandon.
I
Just
do.
celebrate life, buddy. That's what we like to hear, man.
the dark arts.
Man, that dog of his is really picking up that skateboard, and I've been totally digging that, man. I bet it's so awesome.
Oh man, he's pretty rambunctious. And we can't take the dogs out because it's storming out here, so they are all going a little stir crazy.
It seems like bulldogs, for whatever reason, seem to pick up the skateboarding. Man, Chubby Chase
Yeah,
is
why do
already
I
out
keep
there.
seeing that?
Dude,
I keep seeing that in videos and stuff. Just be, I don't know.
it's just like he's a natural. He just like, oh, sweet skate. Yeah, I know how to do this. This is like in my DNA. Like my ancestors are known for this. And so he does it. And I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. This little dog is going to be the best marketing ploy ever.
I have a random question. I just saw something in the chat to get back to the grow topic a little bit. Somebody's talking about the weather changing to be a little bit cold. I know a lot of us are moving away from that, but if you're in the southern hemisphere, your winter is going to be coming up as our spring and summer is coming up. So I'm curious if anybody has suggestions for heating other than maybe lights. I know a lot of people in the winter will switch to like CMH or HPS or even run certain heaters, but I'm not sure what some people despise running electricity just to provide heat. So I'm curious what the panel's thoughts are on that.
We had an interesting.
This is a Southern Hemisphere question?
Well,
Yes.
I guess somebody
Well,
said that they're
specifically-
about to get cold.
Australia. Yeah, I think that's Australian grown who was talking.
Okay.
I asked him where he was, and he said QLD, and I said a friend in Victoria, and I think they were referring to the fact that it's going to be cold there. I'm pretty
I've got
sure
a-
that's what he was referring to. I don't
I
know.
have a lot of listeners on my personal podcast, and I sent a few books to Down Under, so I think it's worth delving into, and evenally somebody will hear this, and
No,
it'll be
for sure,
wintertime.
for sure. It just didn't seem like a question from our part of the planet right now.
No.
I don't know, man. I always run a heater. I don't know what else to say about it.
Well, it depends
What
on where
kind?
you're drawing air from. It depends on how you're set up. If you have a long room, if you're like indoors, or if the space that you're in is itself cold.
So many factors.
Yeah, there's just so many things that you can think
You
about
really have to
there.
narrow
But
it down.
in a ventilated space, one of the things would be to try to intake warmer air. It's more important the temperature of the air that's flowing through the space than the temperature of the place that the space is. Like, so if you have a tent in a garage, if the garage is cold, as long as the inflow air is warm enough, you can keep the grow space warm enough. Air cycles through pretty quickly anyway. So that's one thing I would think about. The other thing would be maybe to reduce the airflow if you no longer need it for cooling within the tent.
Both good points. Spartan, you said you use a heater all the time. I'm curious what type you use, and I think Sequence uses one over at their greenhouse, and it's like a huge one. I'm just trying to give
Yeah.
people an idea of the options.
We do too.
The one thing that just jogged my memory, one thing on the greenhouse, you have to make sure you know what you're getting. You have to get that stuff vented the correct way in your greenhouse. Otherwise, you're going to add moisture to your greenhouse if you burn certain fuels. So this is just something to look into. But at home, I just use an oil-filled radiant heater set on a thermostat, which plugged into I think it's called autopilot or something, but it's a controller. It's just is always sensing the temperature, so I'm not relying on the heater to do it. And I like the radiant heater. It's more energy efficient, I think. Another thing that I do is I run my lights at night, the coldest part of the day. So when my room is going to be generating the most heat on its own from the lights, in the coldest part of the day. So it's going to help me with heating there. But yeah, I still have a heater in there, and it's one of those radiant heaters. Now I have so much airflow in my room, and it's a sealed space, so that helps a lot. And it's insulated, so the walls are all insulated, and it's underground. So all those things are helpful to me. It's all insulation, but I still have to run a heater, and I do. But I have a lot of airflow with my regular fans, floor fans, and things like that to mix the air well within the room. I think is very important too.
Do basements hold the I forget what it's called, but there's like geothermal. I think under like 6 or 10 feet under the ground, it's always like 55 or 65 degrees or something like that.
I don't know if MySpace does, because it's like literally maybe 6'4", 6'4" is how far down it goes. But it is always like way cooler feeling when you go between the two levels. Like, upstairs always seems at least 10 degrees warmer. So for sure there is an effect. I'm not sure if it's as strong as like a geothermal would be.
Yeah, I just wondered. Heat rises too, so that might be another explanation for why the heat in the higher part of the house. But go ahead, Brandon. Sorry to cut you off.
If you look at our greenhouses, one of the things that we were talking about as a company when it comes to the cold temperatures out here in Oklahoma, because obviously we want to switch to LED lighting, which is more energy efficient, and we believe that we can set up enough solar here to completely eliminate our electric bill. And then what we were looking at is, we have a propane bill because we have 2 heaters in the back of each house, and they're able to maintain temperatures. However, that also dries out the greenhouse. So if it's in the middle of winter where it's, cold and dry, it makes it challenging to bring up the VPD for moisture in the beginning when we have small plants. Once we build more biomass, it's a little bit easier. But one of the things that we were looking at is the electric cost for the HPS lights strictly during winter time in the coldest part of the season, and if our electric is cheaper than the cost of propane. So what we're doing is we're kind of looking at the overhead of which is more expensive to run during certain time frames where, temperatures are an issue.
Could you
What is propane?
It doesn't make sense, I guess. I'll say, could you light depth the hottest part of the day and use that as your night cycle?
No, well,
supplement on the end or something.
So we could light depth, but the problem is we don't have air conditioning units in these greenhouses. So what would end up happening is the humidity in there would spike crazy, and it would just cause a massive amount of pathogens.
Yeah, you'd have a temperature spike too.
Yeah, being the hottest point of the day, it's greenhouses tend to hold a lot of heat. They used to call them hot houses in some occasions. So depending on how it's built, they'll definitely trap lots of heat.
We do have a huge wet wall, and later on this week, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding industrial water chillers that will chill the water that's run through the wet wall. So even when hot air from the outside is pulled through the vent system, through the wet wall, we'll still have something like 55-degree water that's running through that. So that way we can at least offset a lot of that heat that's coming in.
Isn't one of the drawbacks of the wet wall, if like the humidity is super high, it won't do as good of a job of cooling? Or is it vice versa?
Yeah, so wet walls will add humidity, especially in the backs of the houses. But that's one of the reasons why we have really good airflow. We do our pruning, and then we have what are called they're fans, right? They're big fans, but they don't blow real strong air, right? They blow.
It's more like an air mover. It's just like kind of slow spinning, but it just has a good force to it, so you get that consistent.
Yes, it's specifically for making sure air is moving consistently.
It's really cool to see some of those larger fans and how they operate. I've even seen like I don't know what the name for it is. It kind of looks like almost like a half dome. It's like an upside down fan that blows up, and then the air is kind of recycled down and around, so it's not blowing too intensely, but it moves a fuck ton of air. You see them in a lot of indoor units, and it just kind of keeps the air circulating and moving without being too intense and causing like wind damage on the plant.
I got to give a shout out to all the home growers that are doing, small systems, small rooms, tents, because it can be really, really difficult to maintain consistency in those things. And the guys that are just getting killer results and making badass weed, props to those guys. Cause dude, I am not the best tent grower. I do better when like everything, all the parameters are in place, and it's difficult, man. Even working with the box that I have right now, it's going to take probably 2 runs to really dial that thing in.
Dude, it was so much easier to grow like outdoors or in more commercial setups where you have huge ceiling heights, like lots of commercial equipment. When like I started up my first home grow in a tent and closet, it was so much smaller than anything I'd ever done before. There were so many additional challenges I never expected. But the one thing I will say is for anybody who is setting them up or who's got them set up now, once you get it to the point, and ideally like you've got it dialed in, then it can pretty much coast for a lot of people, because like you get the right amount of equipment, fans, exhaust, air conditioning if you need it, dehu if you need it, humidifier if you need that. And once you get to the point where you're like, all right, I know what my space is, and you can dial that in, it's a great feeling. I'm sure a lot of the people in the chat have done it, or they're actively working towards getting there. I guess we should throw out some
and on
tips
the
for
other side of that, it's a pretty
how to dial it in.
powerless feeling when you have a tent that's getting too hot or too dry or something, and you don't have that right equipment and you don't have the budget to sort of go and buy whatever you need. So those are some stresses that I think every sort of new grower goes through on their first run. And yeah, it definitely gets easier when you get the right equipment.
The one thing I'll say is a lot of people, they get too much light, and that often leads to too much heat. So if you can appropriately size your light using the Coco for Canvas grow light calculator, that'll help you right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because like for example, I ran 315 watt CMH over a 5 square foot space when it's meant for a 9 square foot space. So I was dealing with too much light and a little bit too much heat, and it caused me a lot of more challenges than I would have had if I would have gotten a smaller light set up.
Yep.
And the other thing is just this is the cheap home grow, some tips, because the environment regulation, I think, is one of the things that people have a lot of hard times with. And Doc gave a great example of like you're growing in your grow tent is like extremely dry, which a lot of people, they're early plants, there's not a lot of vegetative mass. So you've got like these small pots, either solo cups or 1 gallons, and you got these tiny little plants, and the RH in your room is like 20 or 30 or 15 or whatever the fuck it is. And you're like, oh my God, what the hell am I going to do? I've tried a few different things. I put bowls of water in the room and just let that like evaporate out. I had drip trays that when I'd water it, let the water stay in the drip tray. And then a tip from the local hydro store that used to be open here, the guy said, does your tent have a waterproof tray in the bottom? And I said, yeah. So he said, well, just pour clean water in the bottom of the tray, fill it up like an inch or two. If you have, and I set mine up where I don't have any cords running across the floor. All of my cords are at least a foot off the floor, so there's no water getting in there. But if you're able to do that and flood that tray, you have basically the entire square footage of your tent now has water that's going to be evaporating off, and it'll raise your humidity, which is often very, very needed. It'll make your plants grow faster, healthier, and just more often than not, it's needed to get your RH into the proper range for people in new tents that are just starting off.
And if you're a new grower, the only thing I would add to that, Jack, is I would just put a towel down, just get a sopping wet beach towel and put that down on the floor. Or after you put the 2 inches of water, I'd put enough towels down to soak it up. The towels actually increase the evaporative surface area of that and actually increase the RH in that room rather than decrease it. And it also sort of seems a little bit safer than just flooding the tray with water. But yeah, for a lot of small scale growers, I agree. You can do these little hacks to get through your first grow. Nobody wants to have to keep doing that forever, though. Nobody wants to have to keep like changing out wet towels or whatever for a long time. And one of the benefits of being a cannabis grower is you usually by the second, third grow, you can afford to upgrade your equipment a little bit and get the stuff that you need.
Yeah, like
a bunch of old towels in any grow situation is definitely a pretty good move to have on hand. You'd be surprised how many times I have a stack of older towels.
Oh, yeah.
This fell here, this
For when
fell
you
here,
flood?
just grab it. Oh yeah.
Bills.
So
Dude,
Yeah, old towels is generally a good way to improve marital relations too.
how many
Yeah,
times have
absolutely.
you guys flooded a room or left the RO on or left the water on?
Anybody who doesn't have a float valve or a float valve that they trust too much and it stops working that one time and they flood their whole room.
Man, I have this this pump that just recirculates, you know, either biocontrols or nutrients in my reservoir if I'm watering. And sometimes because it goes up and it makes a little L, sometimes it does a little rotation and it starts spilling water everywhere.
well, I
Dude, I
learned
have
from
the,
Spartan here to get a Berkey water filter, and I have a Berkey water filter, and I absolutely love it, and it's really helped me out and way better than what I was doing. But I'll think I'm cool, and I'll like, okay, I'm gonna fill this gallon, and I'm gonna walk over here and do this real quick, and the next thing I know, the water is just all over the floor. So I've definitely done that recently a few times.
Oh, I've done that. I don't know how many times, dude. I can't even count. A lot.
Oh, I flood something once a week.
It's funny, man.
Trust.
The poor man's wet wall is I came up with in one of my first grows in the tent. I was doing the bowls of water in the tent, and I was trying to get a basically towel. It was like a hand towel to sit out of the bowl and have air blow across it, kind of like wet wall-esque. And what I figured out was I could take a wire hanger and basically bend it and then like unravel the top so it had like a spike that went out, and the towel would just hang right in front of the fan and then drip into a big bowl of water. And it actually was really effective. So there's a lot of little creative things. But like Doc said, after your first grow, hopefully you can invest some of the money that you're saving on not spending on cannabis.
Yeah,
That's kind of like
a great idea. It's real easy and cheap. He says he's got an empty cloner tray, put some hydrogen pellets in it, and an air diffuser, you know, an air stone, and an air pump. Kicks off major humidity in his bed, he says.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. You know what? That's the greatest thing about being a home grower, growing cannabis. You know, if you really want to be a good grower, it's all about being able to like engineer shit, right? Like figure out solutions to make something work, because
100%.
our situations are different and it's not always going to work, and we got to retrofit a tent or a room or a basement or an attic or this or that, right? And so there's more than one way to skin a cat. And so being able to be creative in the things that you do and the approaches that you would take to solve problems is one of the best things that you can do, you know, as a home grower.
Somebody just said you can get an ultrasonic fogger on Amazon for $12. I've seen people do that.
Yeah, dude.
Put it in the little
I
tub.
use those. We use those in our room where we do all our little clones, man. You can take a 5-gallon bucket, fill that up with water, throw one of those on there, and it's ultrasonic misting the whole time. They work great.
What you just described, Brandon, is kind of what's a part of the addicting nature of growing for me, is that you get that rush of accomplishment when you rush up against the obstacle, you fucking just figure your way around it and it fucking works. It's like, fuck yes. You know what I mean?
It encourages entrepreneurship too. I mean, look at the plant trainer, right? So here's the thing about being a good, business person is if you can find a solution to a problem and make an invention and make something better. I mean, that's part of the whole thing too,
Rest in peace to Rob Smith of the Atlas Plant Trainer. There's also the plant trainers on Instagram that have like the little weights. It's like a little rubber thing that bends the plant over and locks it in place. And then there's, there's so many different little products like that. There's a corkscrew, the OG screw, that is basically like a bamboo stick with a metal wire that is like a screw that people use to train around. And then there's the like see-through. It looks like a little laundry basket, but they basically cut out the sides so that it basically pops up like one of those laundry baskets that folds down into a cylinder. And instead of being a full cylinder, there's just a bunch of squares around the outside that you could trellis the plant for each individual one. So a lot of interesting ways to go about doing some of these training.
Like a tomato thing to me than the cannabis thing, but he makes them for cannabis. I've seen some bigger ones that he makes. That one, I think it's called the plant.
Farmers are some of the most ingenious problem solvers in my experience. They come up with some pretty cool stuff and have had for millennia.
Dude, farmers are fucking awesome. shout out to all the farmers out there.
I feel like a farmer is like being able to grow your own food is almost like it is called a plant trainer. Being able to grow your own food is almost like secret knowledge now. You know what I mean?
Dude, right?
Like people are like, what?
It's like-
that grows?
it's like-
are you kidding me?
When the major producers of food are the people that brought you Roundup and heroin, it's probably a good option to grow your own food.
Yeah, it's good.
The knowledge of how to do it is absolutely like sort of a superpower. I agree with that. And yeah, that's one of the cool things about, we're all farmers too, guys. I mean, I think that, that's one of the reasons we want to celebrate this. These are good skills to have, not just to be able to sort of grow your own cannabis.
It's very multidisciplinary.
It's always,
I think it's no mistake that we have.
That's always what I put down when I'm
Sorry about that. I guess we're overlapping.
For me, cannabis has always been about freedom and independence, self-sufficiency. Being able to create your own medicine, grow your own food, all that stuff is really about getting away from, these large conglomerates and these institutions that kind of get us trapped in a way of living. And, I want to be independent. I want to be real free, like, the Constitution free, common law, not statutory, not fiat currency. I want like real substance. I want real value for
guys.
what
We were
I'm
talking
making.
about trying to keep it more on the grow side of things, and I know that the aspiration of freedom is a great thing, but I don't want to push people away, because last week we did have some complaints about getting a little bit too political. So
Sure.
I just wanted to direct the attention, I guess, to
this is
share
a really
screen.
interesting product. I've never actually seen this before.
Yeah, so I showed off 3 different ones. This is the stem trainer. I also showed off the God, I'm already forgetting the name.
There's another one I was just looking
plant
at the other
peeler.
day called Cannabender that's similar to this thing you're looking at there.
Yeah, they're like 3D
It's kind of
printed
weird, though.
plastic.
Because you can make a plant look just like that without like a special trainer to hold it down. You just have to be.
I think this is marketed at new growers, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, you definitely can't, Brandon, and I probably can't too, but there's probably people out there that can't. So, but yeah, I see what you're saying for sure. Sometimes I'm like, wow, like people can't do that, but I mean, I forget sometimes that I've done this so many times. Sometimes it's just like waking up in the morning, like watering my plants and doing the things I need to do in my grow. It's just part of my routine.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on the thing. I've often been in a situation where I just super cropped a plant and I'm like, man, I want something to kind of hold this in place. And some of these little plastic gadgets seem like they might be pretty convenient for that. But I do tend to agree. It would depend on sort of the price point. They're probably not worth a lot, because you could fashion something out of something else.
The plant yo-yo can perform all of the tasks of all of these things that you've shown so far.
And they're pretty cheap too.
Yeah.
The thing is too, you have, like, for me, when I'm thinking about things, I have to think about what the amount of time something is going to take and what it's going to cost. Because when you're
then you got to take and remove those at harvest. That'd be a nightmare.
I mean, when you're dealing with 800 plants in a single greenhouse, you have to take, all the small things into consideration.
Well, yeah, that's why we multiple trellis.
Yeah.
This plant trainer looks like, to be honest, it'd be the least work. Maybe you could just pop it up around each plant.
Yeah,
each day you just kind of pull it. It's like a cage, like Mendo Dope style outdoors. You can even see this plant.
I like the tops of it, honestly. How they put like almost a scrog across the top. I saw.
Yeah,
but isn't that just
they're
like
called
a
stackers?
Cage?
Yeah, it's exactly.
It's a fabric tomato cage, but it's 98% translucent fabric. They're reusable. They're washable, and so you can basically have your plant in the middle, and this person's not really making good use of it. I hate to say it, but then you can see where people actually pulled it through on the outsides, and they're taking up more space than they would have if it was growing up straight up. So I definitely think it can be effective. And those things like Spartan's talking about, see like right here on my mouse, if you can see it on the far left, they call those scroggers or stackers, and you can buy those for different like layers. You can do that in the middle of the stack
that's
as well.
cool.
It's funny because like in our greenhouses, like we have these PVC, rails that go all the way that we use for our trellis, but we'll take like we'll take like a piece of nylon twine and we'll run that all around the sides just to like prop stuff up more, just to get them. I mean, sometimes it's just about just being innovative and
So
just
what we do is we get a wider net. I can't remember. I think it's another foot wide or something. So we have it hang off a half a foot. So on the sides, it just hangs over the side, and we can use those sides to hold those sides up a little bit, but to go through and tuck them in through the side.
I got to put up a trellis net on my plants that are in veg right now. The one that I just posted, man, I've got the plants in my greenhouse number 2 right now. I don't think I've ever seen anything more healthy. Like, I've been doing this a long time, and these things are like getting it, dude. They're growing so fast. It's ridiculous.
Somebody said they're not just green when they're that healthy. They have like a sheen. It was Breeder Steve on Twitter the other day. And when I looked at your plants, every fucking last one of them had a sheen. They're all the same height. They're Kelly green, dark green, just like nice, not too dark, but they just have that almost like they're foliared, but maybe weren't foliared. They just have like a coat to that leaf.
Dude,
it's so healthy.
Like a gloss, right?
Yeah, it's because they're producing oils.
And waxes too. I think another thing is that when you spray a ton, although I do know that you spray preventatively a lot, Brandon, but like,
oh yeah,
depending
dude.
on what you're spraying, you can eat away at that.
So one of the things
acute...
people don't realize is that I think half of our budget for cultivation is actually IPM.
Damn, that's pretty.
Yeah, lots of people don't consider the resources necessary to really keep things like locked down securely. Not like here and there, but like very well done. It can be very expensive. It often is
expensive.
It's your security.
If you want to continually have success, it's a measure that has to be taken though. You can't half-ass anything, especially at the scale that we have, because our pressure is larger. We have a bigger space. We have a larger plant count. So
kind of a one bad apple spoils the bunch sort of situation, right?
Exactly. And so being able to adequately maintain our regiment, and we're doing the Bouveria Bossy. I really, really like mixing together the spore with Pyganic. That is hands down one of the best dual effective biocontrol treatments that I have ever seen, hands down. I really like using Suff Oil X, and using the things like Bacillus thuringiensis, because now we're starting to see leaf hoppers coming around because it's season, more moss. So we need to we make sure that we're in there and that we're doing our drenches with our biocontrols, and then we're doing foilers with our Suff oil and enzymes and Trichoderma bacillus subtilis combo.
Your greenhouse isn't closed and sealed, it's open on the sides or something?
No, but here's the thing though, we have a wet wall that has a vent. We have it's more.
You can put a screen like a insect screen
net
on the front side of that.
Here's the thing, right? Our plants are perfect in there. We just have to maintain what we're doing consistently. Consistency is key, really.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a consistency question that I think might not be expected from the group, and Matthew might even want to jump in on this, but as far as like IPM and just general grow management, how do you all feel about having a camera? I know like Wyze, WYZE camera makes pretty affordable cameras now that you can access on the internet when you're away from your grow to make sure the lights are off when they're supposed to be off, or that this fan is running, or that this pump is running, or anything like that. You can just see the plants, make sure that everything's going okay. Do you all implement cameras in your grow? And if so,
yes.
Why and how?
Although, I have a little camera that's like a remote security camera. I don't know how much the Wyze thing costs, but the one I got only cost like $20, and it connected to my home Wi-Fi, and then I could check the camera on my cell phone. They could even like pan the camera around and look up and down and stuff, and it had night vision, so that was pretty cool. So there's definitely things like that that are pretty cheap that you can get. You know, it depends on sort of how much time you have and how enthusiastic you are about your grow, also, and how well you have things dialed in. But I think cameras are an excellent idea for new growers, particularly because new growers really like to see their plants and hang out with their plants. And it's probably best that they can do that sort of through their phone or through their computer screen or something a lot of the time when the lights are on, rather than sort of actually being in there with their plants.
Yeah, and like not having to take unnecessary trips from a biosecurity perspective, of course.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah, and
environmental
from like
regulation.
a gardener exposure to LED light perspective, and from
Ooh, yeah,
just
that's
sort of
a- that's a-
maintaining the climate and the grow tent perspective, and for a lot of things. I mean, spending time with your plants is a good idea, but you shouldn't be like sort of going into the tent every 20 minutes.
I just saw an optometrist actually. I want to normalize doing that. I have perfect vision still. Haven't had glasses or anything like that. Lucky me, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah,
I'm about to
I
flex
have
on
a-
you. My vision got better. I used to wear glasses, and now I have 2016 or 2014 vision, so I'm better than normal. And I think that's
Wow.
because if you use the muscles in your eye, granted, there's genetics. Some people actually have bad enough vision that they absolutely need glasses, but there's some optometrists out there that believe if you use your eyes like outside and in different settings, you can actually strengthen them even if they're in a vulnerable state earlier on. So I think that might
Yeah,
have
you
what
can
happened
push
with me.
that too far though and do damage pretty easily too.
That's true.
So
Yeah, and UV light in grows and all that sort of stuff, and even just the light generally, it can definitely wreck your eyes. And I live in San Diego, as you guys know, and I go out all the time. I never wear sunglasses because I have this weird perspective, like I want to see the world as it is, and not with like a tint or anything like that. But that's probably bad for my eyes. So
You need to get some Maui
That
Jims
might
or a
be.
good pair of polarized glasses that have like the HD optics where it actually looks better when you have these glasses on than like
Yeah.
real life, because it's taking away some of the harmful rays and it's allowing you to see the more clear colors of the grass
is that
and
true?
the beach.
I've wondered if that was a gimmick or not. Is that true?
It's true. I had a pair. I lost them in the ocean, but I just buy the $7 polarized ones off Amazon now, because polarized, like basically you have lines going this way, lines going that way, and the sun's rays can only go in basically through one direction. So you're not going to get as intensive light.
Oh.
They're polarized lenses. They're very effective.
You know, if there is a company that manufactures some really cool shades that I really like, they're all made out of wood, Summer Blues Optics, and they make HPS glasses, they make LED glasses, and they make regular sunglasses. And if you are into that kind of thing, you can also use code Bokashi to save 20%.
Good stuff. We have a question from the chat that says, the Honeyman, now we're back on sprays. How about Epsom salt spray concentration? Spartan and Brandon, I think both of you guys use Epsom salts, at least in certain parts of your grows. Do you foliar with them? And if so, what concentration? Per gallon.
Tablespoon per gallon of water is standard, I think, across all cannabis cultivation. If I am not mistaken, I think Spartan will probably agree with me on that.
Yeah, I was going to do the same. Even for a root drench, if you were going to water it in, it'd be the same. Or at least I use the same.
I try not to do, magnesium for me is really, really tricky.
Yeah, it tightens up the soil too. I don't use it anymore as far as I don't use Epsom salts at all actually right now. I would use it as a foliar if I had a magnesium deficiency or something, but yeah, I haven't used it in a long time.
Sour Diesel Tangy asks, this is kind of related, also a foliar question. They say, how often do you recommend foliar feeds? Also, can I foliar feed with Lost Coast IPM treatment? They're referring to Lost Coast Plant Therapy, which is an oil-based IPM spray, and they're curious if they could use that with their feeds as well, or should it just be an IPM?
So
I feel like you shouldn't mix them. That's like together.
No,
I would do them separately.
Yeah, you don't want to. You don't want to mix a nutrient with your IPM stuff. Do those things separately. I really, really like Sulfoil X, man. I really like Sulfoil X a lot. It's really effective.
It's really disgusting, but it works.
It smells like shit.
It's inexpensive though too. You know, so that's one of the kind of things. I mean,
but it comes out like one big soybean turd. It's fucking so gross. Like one big white soybean.
You gotta shake that
Poopy
motherfucker up. Dude, you
It's
gotta
true,
go
you
beast.
definitely
Hey,
have
you
to-
gotta, dude, you gotta go beast mode on those bottles, dude.
Oh, I know,
'cause-
and they're fucking heavy as shit too.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I really like that as IPM because it's really, really effective. It's a kind of broad spectrum.
There was
Yeah, it works
the
good
bug
by
lady,
itself,
maybe
but-
was it Suzanne Wainwright? I think she pushes that pretty heavily, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, she recommended it too for sure.
It's another BioWorks product, and BioWorks, you know, they have a pretty good reputation when it comes to their IPM products and
We
different
use
products.
Zerotol. You guys
Ze-
use Zerotol? We use that from them.
That's
I actually-
at reset. Well, they'll do the Zerotol for
Yep.
like cleaning and stuff
We do
like
it through
that.
through the lines. Is how we like to push it through the lines at the end. And
Yeah.
reset.
Yeah, we'll
I have
wash,
a
spray
fun
out the
story about.
ACs and all that.
Let's let Matthew get in here real
Oh,
quick.
sorry. I can't actually tell. I think I might be having an odd connection thing sometimes. At least this episode more than others. So I apologize if I overspeak. But I do have a fun story about BioWorks. I spoke with I guess at the time he was either head of the department or the president of the company. I don't remember which one it was. He's Matthew Krause or Kraus. I don't know. And I really enjoyed being able to talk with him, an associate of his, because they were able to walk me through some of the actually I asked a lot of like deep questions about their Bouverie Bassiana product and kind of what the origins of that was and whether we could use a penetrant with the Bouverie Bassiana. And I think we were
Such as what?
I forget. It was some sort of
You're
organic.
not talking about a surfactant, but you're talking about something that will help with the aid of it becoming systemic.
Yeah, well, it actually was both. It was a surfactant that also operated like a penetrant, and he was talking. And this is not for cannabis. This was for like Gerbera daisies, and I think it was specifically because we were dealing with leaf miner flies. So they would get into the leaves and they would lay their eggs, and the larvae would live in the margin of the leaves.
Yeah.
And so we were looking for something that could get the spores, because I had read in some research that in some cases people were able to use, I think it was Silhouette 87 or something like that. It has some sort
Silhouette,
of, I'll put
yeah.
it in the chat.
Mhm.
Have you used Silhouette?
No, I did a bunch of research on it though. I haven't used it, but I know that it is a surfactant that works really, really well for the penetration of endophatic bacteria.
And that might also be why I saw it in the research doing, I think it was Steve, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I could put it in the chat too, but it's like Savold or something like this. And he actually he worked with the USDA and all around great guy. And I guess he also worked with BioWorks too. And so they had a lot of really cool experience. And they just talked to me about it for like an hour or so. And this was like years ago, almost a decade, more like 8 years ago or 7 years ago. And so I'm a big fan of people who are willing to go above and beyond for that customer service and helping people out who have those weird edge case inquisitive questions. Just wanted to share that.
So I've been, I have, microbe concentrate spores for a lot of different species of bacteria and fungi. And one of the things that I'm always thinking about is how can I make this more effective? How can I, create more colony forming units? And I was thinking about Bouverie bassiana, and the way that I currently use it is I just mix it in with the water, and I usually use like a pyganic for dual efficacy. And one of the things that I was thinking about was can this thing be cultured in the type of environments that I use to do the other consortiums that I create, using maybe something like an insect frass, something on the lines of like a bokashi that's been inoculated with Bouverie bassiana, but instead of using a wheat brand, using something like a frass, and to see if, I want to see if I can colonize Bouverie bassiana on insect frass or on insect chitin, like chitinase, to see if I can use it as an effective like top dress for, different insect pests. That's something that I keep thinking about, and I'm just trying to figure out how I can do it.
I talked with Steve Reisner at Potent Ponics because he did something with like IMO4 where they were using insect frass and using it to, I think Spartan could probably tell a little bit more about the story, but in Africa, I think they had like locusts and they were spraying it and it was really helping them. Either got rid of them completely or knocked down the numbers really significantly.
So
Yeah, GHA stands for grasshopper active, for example.
Yeah, I think he came on the show. Was he? I don't know. I go on to my shows. I think he might have been on the show. I can't remember where I heard it, but
He did come on the show.
okay. But yeah, so that's so cool. So what his idea was, the traditional IMO you use in rice to collect, what would you call it? A organism.
Indigenous microorganisms, right?
Indigenous. Thank you. So what he thought at the same time, why not try to, you're using the rice as a food source to entice the microbes that you're looking for. Why not throw in the actual thing that you're wanting to get rid of, which was locusts at the time. I think he used frass. I can't remember if there was a locust storm, so it's pretty easy for them to get locusts.
You could certainly crush up a bunch
Chitin or
of bodies.
frass?
Well, there is some.
Well, there's probably chitin in frass too.
Yeah,
some
almost
degree.
always.
Depends on the bug we're talking about, though.
Okay, so the science behind it was he was looking for chitin because he wanted something that would attract a chitinase producing microbe, obviously. But I believe he took the actual locust because there was a locust storm or something going down. But it might have been insect frass. My memory doesn't serve me well here. Either way, he put that in. So when he cooked the rice itself, he threw the chitin in with it, and so it was. So then that rice was, we'll say, inoculated with chitin also. And when he used that to make the collection, and then he actually had to go all the way to IMO 3, which was to make it a liquid IMO. Then he was able to use it in a foliar application that completely decimated the grasshoppers, which I thought was awesome. You're muted, Brandon.
I'm gonna have to hit him up because one of the things that we deal with out here are leaf hoppers, and they're the little tiny ones. They're tiny little grasshoppers, but they eat the shit, and there's tons of them. We dealt with them last year. This year we haven't had so many because of all the storms and it's still raining and all that, but that's one of the things that we're looking at. Is we have another bacteria that they use specifically for grasshoppers, and you give them basically a food, they eat it, infects them, infects other grasshoppers. I need to be able to figure out all these different microbes, the best way that I can, expand colonies, because I think it is going to be really effective for a lot of the issues that, come up at different times of the year.
I'm sure he'd totally be down to walk you through the whole process, and it's something you're probably pretty familiar with. So, yeah, he just, to my knowledge, that was the basic overview of it. He just used the chitin itself as a inoculation in the cooking of the rice, and then he just set it out in nature and let whatever show up and start working on it.
I think it's a cool idea, but one of the main problems with biocontrols like this, like entomopathogenic fungi and bacteria, is that and the same biowork story is relevant here. When I was asking about a plan that I had to use the conidia and propagation materials as like a trap, and like use an attractant and kind of like get the insects to sort of like bait it in such a way that's attractive so that they land on the propagated material, and then they have a exoskeleton full of the stuff, and then kind of create that problem for them before they even start to produce leaf miner eggs and that kind of a thing. And they were telling me that one of the problems with doing something like this or rearing it over and over again, like, can we do that? And of course, they're the people producing it, so I try to take it with a grain of salt. But one of the problems that they dictated to me, and they sent me some research of that Steve Defold guy that I mentioned earlier, about how it's really hard to keep the virulence traits high. And I've talked about this before, but just because you've cultured something from the environment doesn't mean that it's going to like keep those traits. If you keep culturing and reculturing it,
Yeah.
particularly things that are very physiologically costly, just like with plants. If they escape environments where they don't need to keep up costly relationships with microbes, they will lose those traits if they don't need them, and they won't be hurt by it. And similarly, like a Bouveria bassiana culture or something else that doesn't have to like fight an insect immune system, doesn't have to attenuate other sorts of physiological barriers. It doesn't keep those traits for very long, apparently, and so that's why they have like millions of dollars of technicians and equipment to like test and make sure that their isolates are up to snuff.
Have I sent any of the Bouveria bassiana to you, Matt?
Definitely not, but would always be interested.
All right, I'll send some stuff over to you. I have some
Please do.
Metahazarium anispolate. I think that's how you pronounce it. It kills flies and ticks.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
have some
definitely.
Bouveria, and I have some Bacillus thuringiensis too. I'll send all three of them. You can test them out and see.
Yeah,
Brandon,
yeah, I would love to do that.
Do you have the buffalo tree hopper, or do you have the red banded, aka the candy striped leaf hoppers?
That's the one I got right there.
Neither.
That one's my part
neither.
right there. They don't seem to fuck with my cannabis much. I think they're cool as fuck looking.
I love how they look.
Are
They're just
pretty
so
cool.
beautiful. That's one thing I was gonna say is like, damn, it's a shame if you have to get rid of them because they are beautiful.
Actually, it's not this guy. His head isn't very square like this. It's similar to this, but it's different. And they do eat plants. They put little holes in there. One of the biggest concerns that I have with any insect is that they can carry viroids, and that they can also carry other parasites like hemp russet mite. So
what the hell is that one on the top is fucking weird.
Oh yeah, have you seen those? Those got a lot of interesting internet fame when those just came out. I don't remember the name, but it's thought that all of these weird horns are like either like some sort of like dispersal mechanism for heat, or probably more likely like pheromones or other volatiles. But it's not very well
on the
understood.
right looks almost like a stinger, like the back end of a bee.
Right. It could also be mimicry too. A lot of
like a weapon.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's used
or just
to like
look like something, so something stays away, kind of a thing.
Thorns and spikes and spines are one of those adaptations that work really well because it's not hard to maintain, and it's very hard to for some things in many ways to like if like a bird or a dog or a wolf or something goes like bite something like that, it's not going to be very fun. You don't have to do very much to be problematic for eating. Yeah. Actually, I recently, if you want, Jack, I have a video that Aaron actually helped me produce about the buffalo tree hoppers, right? And some of them have those like superhumoral horns, and some of them have like a flat sort of non-buffalo horn body. Yeah, there we go. And so there's those two. And Aaron actually, shout out to Aaron, who's not here right now, Aaron the grower. But he sent me photos and video of these on his cannabis plants.
That looks pretty damn big.
Oh, that's probably forced perspective.
Okay, I was gonna say it looked like as big as a hand. Holy shit.
That would be pretty scary.
Okay, that's better. I thought there was a hand. That's a branch. Thank God. Holy shit.
Yeah, right. So yeah, these little guys, these are kind of neat, and it's just one of those examples where you'll get pests that like are kind of innocuous, or we don't really know how bad they're going to be for cannabis or other plants even. But whenever we find some, I really encourage people to send me their pest information, and that's one reason I try to help people as much as I can, because I will get exposed to things that are new to me. And this was one of those examples. And I was really appreciative that Aaron shared this footage and allowed me. There's not a lot of research on these either, for that matter. So I couldn't even tell you, what the true fallout would be. But in my experience, they're not a huge problem. But yeah, there they are.
Here's Aaron's image of the cannabis plant.
Mm-hmm.
I've been seeing.
You can see one of them's got like a brown color.
I've been seeing cucumber beetles on cannabis recently.
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of other like kind of flea beetle, leaf beetle type beetles like eating the holes in people's leaves like you were talking about.
I typically give Spartan Grown an opportunity at this point. It's 5:45 here on the West Coast. I know he's got Michigan Bros Grow Show to get on over to, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a second so we can actually see the whole panel again and pass it over to Spartan Grown and ask if he's got any final thoughts before he gives his final shout out.
I want to shout out chat, man. They've been I haven't been able to keep up too much today, but they've been saying very nice things about me in chat today. So much love to chat. Thank you for everything you said. Shout out to Lexi there. I see someone I didn't see with a screen share, so I see she's shouting out me out. But yeah, I'm Spartan Grown signing out. Shout out to you guys on the panel, man. I always love hanging out with you guys. I'm always learning shit, man. How can I not show up? So here I am, and thanks for having me. Love you guys. I'm out of here, and I'll be on the Michigan Rose Grow Show in about 15 minutes.
You can find him at Spartan Grown on Instagram or email him at spartangrown@gmail.com, and also check out Mitten Canico to see the commercial operation that they got going over there in Michigan. Caregiver Craft, and they're killing it. So shout out to Spartan Grown. Always a pleasure to have him, and thank him for his time. So thank you, Spartan Grown. See you at
Grow
Michigan
love,
Rose Grow Show.
Spartan.
Later, man.
I gotta go too. I have some guests coming over and dinner is waiting. So I'm Brandon Rust, and always a pleasure to be here. You guys can find me at rust.brandon. Links to Bokashi Earthworks and Black Label Organics, which is my farm, on IG. Thanks, guys. I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, Brandon, for joining us. I know you're a busy man and you got a lot going on over there in Oklahoma. So I'm happy for you and I wish you continued successes over there. And I know you're hustling, so enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you next week. We were talking a little bit about IPM and buffalo tree hoppers, and I know somebody, I think it was Noah, mentioned earlier it's getting a little bit warmer. And Matthew, I'm curious if you've been seeing just around the Instagram feeds, or whether in your professional or personal work, seeing any more pests that are popping up now that the spring is sort of upon us and summer is just around the corner in the northern hemispheres.
You know, right now would be a great time to be what's the word I'm looking for? Well, the caterpillars of the springtime are probably getting fat and happy at this point. And there's probably been a lot of, like, in some cases anyways, like with regards to moths. Moths are the Helicoverpa moths, the like budworm moths that people deal with so much. In some places in the world, they have multiple generations, or they usually have at least two, if I remember correctly. Sometimes they have way more. It depends on where you are. So I would be probably concerned if you haven't seen those yet and you know that they are in your area, that you'll probably be getting more coming in and laying eggs. And when it gets more closer to autumn and winter, well, mostly before autumn, they're going to go and they're going to pupate. They're going to do that in the ground. And then next spring, they're going to come out as adults, and they're going to start that process over of laying eggs and larvae, and then those larvae feed and bore into your buds, and then the process repeats itself. But I do have one clip from my Instagram that, if you're able to go on it, this has reminded me that I come across a lot more hoverfly larvae lately, and I had a really great video of hoverfly, of a brown hoverfly larva that looked just like a caterpillar. And it sucks because it feeds on aphids. So when people see them, I hope they recognize that it's beneficial and not sort of detrimental. Snappy cow. Yeah, it's that one right there in the middle. Yeah. And so, like, you can tell the difference between a caterpillar and a hoverfly larva, because hoverfly larvae, they have a tapered point and they don't have like a head capsule. Some fly larvae, like fungus gnat larvae, they do have a head capsule, and caterpillars always have a head capsule, but these larvae do not. And they have these like neat little patterns, like triangular kind of patterns on there. But see how it's like moving and undulating, and it's got this like tapered point, and it's like casting its head around to like find a place to anchor. So that's a very kind of fly-like or maggot-like movement,
It's funny. I would have thought its butt was leading the way. Like just
right?
based on the shape, I thought the head would have been the more round end, but the spiked end is the head, and the back end is the round end.
Yeah, exactly. And what they do when they find aphids, or at least those that feed on aphids, is they take these like serrated tongs almost, and they penetrate the body and they hook into it. And then they just start imbibing all the interior fluids until they squeeze it like a Capri Sun. And then they just cast it away. And yeah, they're pretty impressive if I'm being honest. And so
Nature is
I had the
savage.
opportunity.
Did
They
you
are
shoot this
very
on
savage.
a cell phone camera?
I did.
That's impressive because I've tried to identify pests before and get quality footage similar to this, and it always ends up being blurry and like maybe I've got to shake your hand or not as good of a camera. But this is honestly very impressive. I'm happy I was able to share the screen because it is a great example of what this is. A hoverfly larva, you said.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes they're like a green color, sometimes they're brown. There's a bunch of different kinds, but the adults, they look like little, I'm sure people have seen them before. People who might not know the name. I'm sure you've seen these little hovering, well, fly-like things. They often have like a yellow and black coloration, like a wasp or a bee. And but they don't. They have these massive eyes, and that's how you can kind of tell them apart. And they tend to like to hang out around like alyssum and like places where the plants have like small little flowers. In my experience, that tends to be a really great way to attract them too. But they do feed on aphids, and some species feed on like bacteria muck in like ponds and like really anoxic water conditions. Little rat tail maggots, have you ever heard of those? Those are also in the hoverfly group. And other ones will feed on decomposing like plant matter or wood.
So it sounds
I've
like
encountered some.
Is this a beneficial then, or is this going to
Well,
be problematic?
this one's an aphid feeder, but flies are super diverse, and that's one reason why it's hard for even me to identify certain individual species. But and
You have more
sometimes you can't
self-control
tell
than
about.
me for not squishing this thing on your hand, because after about like the fifth, probably wouldn't even have made it to 5 little squirms. I probably would have flicked it or squished it and just presumed it was bad. But always good to get a picture and send it to an expert and get a proper identification if you can.
Yeah, so there's your little bug tip of the day.
I'm glad that you were able
Oh, that's
to
great, Matthew.
give us
Thank you.
one, and we had such a great video to show off along with it, because sometimes when you listen to a podcast, you just can't pick up certain things. So anybody who listens to the podcast, definitely make sure to check out the YouTube after and see the video on, or you could go over to Sync Angel on Instagram, and it's probably the 6th post down, but I'm sure he's going to continue posting, so it'll be easiest just to find it on the YouTube here. But with that said, I think we're coming up to there's only a few of us here, so we don't have to get into final shout-outs just yet. But I'd love to pass it to Noah the Grower and see if he has any final thoughts before we give our sign out.
No, I've been just listening and chimed in a few times and had a great time myself. And yeah, a lot of cool information in the show today. I had a great time.
Well, thank you so much. Always happy to have you. And I know we're not doing the shout-outs just yet, but I want to pass it to Doc and see if he has any final thoughts before we do pass it around the horn.
I guess a couple of things I can sort of shout out. We're doing a new strain review giveaway. If you guys rate strain reviews this month, we actually have prizes for both growers in the US and international growers. Spider Farmer prizes, an SF 7000 and an SF 4000 for people writing strain reviews this month. Check that out on Cocoa for Cannabis. And in just a few days, you have a week left basically to submit suggestions for that FCE 6500 giveaway that I'm doing. The suggestions there is to figure out how far apart the bars should be spaced, and I'm going to run a bunch of tests, and whoever creates the best par map wins that light. So you can check out the test report in the Grow Light guide for the Mars Hydro FCE 6500 and enter your guesses there. And just in about a few more days, we're going to start signing up for the Plant Training Grow Challenge, which sort of coincides with today's topic pretty well. The Plant Training Grow Challenge, we divide groups into training methods. We're going to have a mainline manifold group, a group for people that do topping, a group for people that do bending this time, and then a misfits group. So it's a lot of fun to do the, training challenge, to be going along with a bunch of other people that are trying the same techniques, and then to compare that to like whole group of people that are doing some other techniques. So it was one of our most popular challenge formats last year. We're going to have a bunch of cool prize sponsors lined up for it. And start putting it on your calendar. It's a rolling start in August. The thing with Plant Train Grow Challenge is the flip day is October 1st. So you just try to line up your grow so that you're in position to flip to flowering, or if you're growing autos, that your autos would basically start flowering around October 1st. Those are some updates I have from news, things you guys can get involved in.
That's exciting. October 1st is always Jack Greenstock's birthday out here, so it's easy for me to remember when the Plant Training Grow Challenge starts. I'm still old school and don't post my plants while they're living, so I haven't participated just yet, but I do encourage the people out there to hop on Cocoa for Cannabis and grow along. It's not like a competition where you have anything to lose. You really can only gain knowledge and potentially win prizes and things like that. So it's a great community. You'll probably learn a lot along the way, and it's cool to grow along and see, some people are going to compare themselves. Most people do. There's going to be people that are further along than you and not
but
as
it's
far
definitely
along.
not a competition. So, I mean, you definitely can see how your grow is doing compared to other people's, but the goal isn't to beat everybody else. The goal is that everybody has a really successful grow, and that's the mood in the community, and everybody's just interested in helping support your success. So it's one of these collaborations more than it's a competition. But yeah, I mean, you definitely see some things, and that's part of the fun. I mean, you see what somebody might be doing differently than you. It's getting better results or different ideas and stuff like that. So 100% free to join. There's no catch. It's all about supporting fellow growers. And like you said, there's some pretty cool prizes. So,
and from what I've seen in the community, the competitive atmosphere, it's not really like in a lot of other communities I've seen. There might be like one or two people that are probably personally just pushing themselves to try and be the best or do the best that they can do relative to the competition. But it's like, you don't have to worry about being like the worst grower on there, because what I've seen is when I see somebody who's struggling in one of these competitions, when I've flipped through the forum, people are so almost, they're rooting for that person who's doing the worst more than they're doing for like somebody like themselves or somebody who's doing the best. They're trying to encourage that new grower who's struggling. They'll give you all the advice they possibly can to try and get you up to their level and beyond. So it's really cool to see just that pure collaboration and
I like in this, I think I said this on this show before too, like an obstacle course, right? Like you could run an obstacle course as a competition where everybody that starts is basically trying to beat everybody else and you're elbowing your way through the crowd, right? Or you could run it as a collaboration where your whole goal is to get the whole team across. And it's much more of a collaborative mood like that. I mean, everybody wants to do well, but you definitely want to help everybody else do well too. And they take a lot of pride. The sort of older, more established growers take a lot of pride in helping people get over those hurdles and getting to successful harvests. So
it feels good to give people that success that we had early on and having it for the first time and seeing how happy it makes them and how much money they're saving and how much it improves their life. It's just a wonderful thing to share. With that said, I want to give it to Dr. MJ to give his final shout out and let the people know where they can find you.
All right. Well, you guys can find me on cocoforcannabis.com. And like I said, check out these things, the giveaways, the challenges. I am on Instagram sometimes and I'm here. But yeah, the best place to come and find me, we have a live chat room. You can stop in. A bunch of the people that are chatting now, you'll recognize them if you stop by the Cocoa for Cannabis chat room. And grower love to everybody. It was a fun show. We got onto some training topics and a whole lot of other things. So thanks to the rest of the panelists. Thanks to you, Jack, for always showing up and pulling this thing together every week. And to everybody that shows up and listens to us and supports the show. Grower love.
Absolutely. Grower love. Cheers to Eagle Gardens, Chicha B, Chad Westport. We got Chefo MJ, who said all about the grower love. He's part of the Cocoa for Cannabis community, Smart Poker, and Family Farms, just to name a few of the 100+ people that we've had with us in the chat tonight. Next up, we have Noah the Grower. Go ahead and let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm Noah the Grower on Instagram with 2 E's. You can find me there, Noah the Grower. And I'm always on there. I've been a little bit lazy. I've had a lot of family stuff going on, but I am going to start posting more. And I got a bunch of cool new stuff with this soil. Shout out to Bio365 for hooking me up. And a big shout out to you, Jack, for helping us all out and hosting the show, and Dr. MJ, Spartan, Brandon, everyone that was here, man. I really wish that there was information like this when I first started, and I learned a lot from all you guys. So I'm happy to be here, and I'll see you guys all next week.
Look forward to seeing you next week, and likewise, I've learned a lot from you, and enjoy whenever you show up on the show and what you have to share. And I part of the reason I do this is I'm also learning a lot along with everybody in the community and on the panel. It feels great, and it's a part of this community that I really enjoy, and look forward to keep on continuing here moving forward. Next up, we have Matthew Gates.
Yeah, I definitely had to shout out the chat as well, echoing Dr. MJ and Spartan. I thought that we had some pretty cool questions, especially about the hoverfly poop. Thanks a lot, Chad Westport. It's all nitrogenous waste at the end of the day, isn't it? But if you want to find out more interesting edge case physiological questions about insects and other arthropods and pests and that sort of thing of plants, you can find me mostly on my YouTube channel, Zentinol, for that information. You can also check out my Discord, which you can gain access to for a minimum of $1 a month on Patreon. And we've had a pretty cool amount of interaction so far. And I've had a lot of people come in recently. And so I'd like to welcome more people in, because it's a much better medium for me to have these sorts of conversations rather than social media like Instagram and that kind of a thing. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to help you out with your IPM issues.
Awesome stuff. Well, you've definitely helped me out a lot along the way, and I think that many other people in the community feel that way, and we're thankful for you and all the work you've done and continue to do. I hope many people are able to support the Patreon if they have the ability to do so. And I guess last but certainly not least, myself, I'm Jack Greenstock. I'm your weekly host of the show, Growing with My Fellow Growers. You can find me at Jack Greenstock on Cannabuzz as well as Instagram, Jack_Greenstock on Twitter. You can email me at jackgreenstock47@gmail.com. And last but certainly not least, for the next 2 years at least, I just bought 50strains.com. So if you're looking for a copy of 50 Strains of Green, my first book, the second edition paperback is now available on 50strains.com, so you can pay with a card or hit me up direct if you want to pay through Venmo, Cash App, or whatever the last one is. I'm kind of blanking on it, but that's
Cold straight cash.
Straight hard cash. Yeah, some people were like, hey, I don't do any apps, I'll send you cash in the mail, and I actually accepted that from a couple. But yeah, Venmo, Cash App, and PayPal was the third one, I guess. So cheers to that, and everybody who got a book already, thank you all for the support. Really appreciate that, and I will see you all next week. Peace and love. Jack Greenstock signing out.
Grow love, everyone.
Happy growing.